This is Tapan Patel, founder of PSPod. At PSPod, we facilitate awesome conversations between curious, creative, and intellectual minds. I welcome you all to the seventh episode of Facebook Live with PSPod. We thank you all for your support in increasing the reach of PSPod. Through such kind of conversations, we wish to demonstrate that what kind of learning experiences you can derive by engaging into conversations with such amazing people. They provide great insights and a sense of delight. After classical music and the world of tea, today now we are going to discuss an enormously important topic and much discussed in the recent time, that is geopolitics. Thank you all of you for joining us. Uh, basically, the geopolitics word is basically an intertwining of political power with the relevance of geopolitical geographic space of the earth. uh, it studies foreign policies and understands, explains, and predicts the international political behavior uh, with the geographical variables. So often we listen about we listen into the news about the trade embargo, border conflicts, fluctuations in the crude oil prices, weapon procurements, trade embargo. These are all attempts to exhibit the muscle power of a country onto the larger geographical landscape to prove their political power. In Indian context, where in the recent time, weapon procurements, abrogation of Section 370, border conflicts at Galwan Valley and Doklam with China, trade embargo by India on the Chinese companies. These are very much topics which are very much talked about topics across media in the recent time. So in this today's conversations, we'll talk about something that has some relevance onto this geopolitics world, the paradigm of a political risk, and we will try to understand how it affects to the people on individual level like us. So in these conversations, we'll have amazing discussions with Dr. Vignesh Ram. Dr. Vignesh Ram is basically holds PhD in geopolitics and international relations. His expertise is in he's expert in advising on corporates on their political risk vis-a-vis their business operations across various geographies. He heads an organization named Political Risk and Intelligence Service Management, that is PRISM. So Dr. Vignesh Ram is also on PSPod. You may meet him over video call. His PSPod handler is @Vignesh1. He also engages with his followers on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We have shared the LinkedIn link of his profile in the description box. You may follow him there as well. So welcome you, Dr. Vignesh Ram. Welcome
Thank you so
to
much.
Facebook
Thank
Live.
you.
So we'll have a basically we want to understand what is the difference between geopolitics and political risk. It would be great if you may share this in Indian context.
Sure. So when we talk about something called as geopolitics, so geopolitics is traditionally nothing but the study of how political power is reinforced or exercised because of on account of geographical arrangements, whether it's things like you hear on a daily basis, like borders or geographical terrain or others, and how that influences basically the exercise of political power. So, just to give you an example on Indian context, historically you have seen that you must have not very much heard that has there been a conflict between India and China? I mean, in recent history, yes, there has been, but historically there is a reason, and that is basically our geography. To the north, between the border between India and China, you have some of the highest mountains in the world, which make it extremely difficult for having frequent So just to contrast it, if I can give you an example, you are very much aware of the Great Wall of China, right? It's one of the wonders
Yes.
of the world. And the Great Wall of
Yes.
China was built by the Chinese, successive Chinese empires and emperors to, stop the Mongols from invading China, what we today knew as China. So that is the reason, that is because geography there's pretty much nothing in the middle. There are no high mountains. There's nothing as a geographical barrier to stop them from coming and invading those places. So they had to build a mighty fortress or a boundary to stop them and monitor every single time. But here, when we look at the border between India and China, the erstwhile China, Tibet was an independent kingdom or a country, and beyond Tibet was really high mountains, and that formed as a natural barrier. So that in
Right.
turn shapes how your political behavior is challenged by your neighbors or your neighboring countries. Now, you might
Right.
historically see why there were invasions from the west of India and not from the east, you know, from the towards the China.
Mhm.
Most of the Mughal invaders and all, they came from the west, whether it's from
Yeah.
Central Asia or from Afghanistan. That's because the terrain
Yes.
was quite accessible and they could come. And but if you look at the eastern part of it, from whether it's from the Tibetan plateau or beyond, we hardly had anything
Right.
because we had natural barriers which protected the geography of India, protected it actually throughout history. And how does in the current contemporary context, those are ancient times, and then after that, in after our independence 62, we had a war with China. So that has changed
Right.
because of technology, because you are able to build, you had access, you are to able to build, you were able to conquer geography basically, to an extent.
Right.
You can't do it completely, but to an extent you could do it. So you could reach, and then once finally there was contact, there was conflict. So obviously that is how geopolitics can also be challenged, but it cannot be challenged beyond a certain point of time because you cannot change geography. You cannot choose
Right.
your neighbors. India has Pakistan as its neighbor. It is its neighbor. You cannot change it. And that's our fate. So that's
Right.
how it goes about with it. Take another example of Nepal, for instance.
Right.
Nepal is a landlocked country, and so
Absolutely.
because of that, its access to ports, its access to fuel, its access to various other things like food grains and others are dependent on India. So there are certain
Yes.
limitations based on which Nepal can act against India, against India's interest, because it is completely dependent on India because of its geography. So that,
Right.
in an Indian context, is geopolitics. If you ask. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. So, Dr. Vignesh, please give us brief about India's geopolitics, like in terms of events, happenings, government decisions, and their repercussions.
That's actually, I mean, I sort of see that that's quite a broad thing because I think we have like courses which take so many years to finish on this
Yeah.
very topic
So,
on India's national
a
security
brief
and defense. But
understanding.
yeah,
Yeah.
but on the basis of how we look at it, interestingly, India's geopolitics, if you ask, in geopolitical sense, India is very strategically located. Um, so one of the examples is that. A lot. I remember this instance where there was a talk by the former deputy prime minister of Singapore when he had come to India, and I had a chance to be in that program and interact. And the interesting thing is that they are all looking to make India as a. They want to establish their base in India to have operations to different parts of the world, and that is again because of geography, because India is so strategically located that it's almost between east and the west. So transiting through India makes perfect sense, and it makes perfect business sense as well. And yeah, that is one of the examples. But so if you look at it from a strategic point of view, when we talk about military strategy or geopolitics, that's from the business point of view. But from military strategy and geopolitics as well, India is very strategically placed. If you see, generally we have a term which is used called sea lines of communication. So sea lines of communications are like your maritime superhighways which carry your goods, your trade, your oil, everything from the west to the east. And this is what this gives us perfect idea of India's geography, because India is strategically located between both. And if we have a strong, which we have a strong navy, we are able to control and oversee how this trade happens. And there is always contest between countries and major powers. And in recent news, you must be hearing about China deploying a lot of military capability in the Indian Ocean region. And that is as a result to thwart any type of action against any impact on China's goods and trade and oil and everything passing through this region. So it is trying to deploy its own troops to safeguard
Right.
its own goods and other technology. So in
No,
that
no,
sense, India's,
can you share some event,
I'm
some kind of event that has some government repercussion, government actions and repercussion in the subsequent public forum or at an international level?
Um, uh, in which sense would you like me to cover that?
So, in a sense, like there are in India, we have border conflicts with China and Pakistan. We procure weapons. We impose some trade embargo. These are quite well-known things in the recent history, and not history of recent time, right? But there are a lot of other events must be happening from Indian bureaucrats or Indian political wings, right? That impacts India's geopolitical stand on the global landscape, which are
Well,
lesser known in nature, important for Indian national security point of
well, there are a lot of things which happen because global politics is such that it cannot be restricted to something happening in the United States, for instance. Um, might be a domestic thing for them, but how, for instance, the U.S. elections itself, which is happening in November, the outcome of the election could determine their policy towards India, their foreign policy towards India. And a lot rides on the foreign policy towards India because, in a sense, a government which is more favorable to India's national security interests or India's, sensitivities, regional sensitivities, would be much more favorable. And in that sense, what's happening over there impacts us as well. And that's the same thing. For instance, another example is that the trade embargo on Iran, for instance, because the US and Iran have a long-standing conflict in West Asia, not a physical conflict, but this is more of a conflict by other means, where you put trade embargoes on countries because of their activities in the region. And a lot of what happened between the US and Iran impacted India, because India used to import a lot of oil from Iran, which was very useful for our economic growth per se. So India needs to find then alternatives if we cannot buy from Iran. And these geopolitical calculations cause a lot of problems domestically as well, because then we go on to the domestic repercussions of that, because we see volatility in these type of markets, oil markets impact our domestic prices of fuel and others, and causes a lot of domestic problems for the political parties. And that's where it leads to political risk, in fact, for investors or for others over here. So geopolitics is very integral also for that, for the fact that of political risk when we talk about such factors.
Okay, so we'd like to know. I mean, you shared interesting stuff on geopolitics side. What is the counterpart that is you recently said political risk? So each of the
So
actions has some political risk associated. So what is this political risk?
definitely. So political risk is a combination of various actions which happen at a global and domestic level, and which are at due to political decision making, and how that political decision making impacts various aspects. So when we talk about the global level, we have something like geopolitics, which
Yes.
has repercussions for countries at the domestic level. Or just giving you an example is that again about the United States, for instance, the US US regime which changes can alter a lot of things throughout the world, and because of their approach towards those countries or those organizations, and a lot of things can change. But when you come down to a domestic level, and we look at investments, we talk a lot about India rising in the rankings of ease of doing business. Now, ease of doing business, for instance, depends a lot on how much of the regulatory part you ease for businesses to come and do business in India. And that a lot of that depends on the type of government, for instance, which is there, which is willing. How much are you willing to give away in terms of easing the business norms? And that might not be always beneficial. Recently, you must be hearing a lot about the RCEP, RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So it was a free trade agreement which was to be signed with the countries in what we term as the ASEAN countries plus their 6 dialogue partners, which also includes India, the ASEAN plus 6. And India did not sign that agreement. It said that maybe at this point of time, India doesn't want to go ahead with signing the agreement. Now, there are various concerns because of that. And that is also, there is a concern about our trade deficit, which we have with China. Because once what happens is that when we sign the RCEP agreement, one component of that is also having a free trade agreement with China. Now, when you have a huge deficit, a trade deficit with a country, it's extremely difficult to sign a free trade agreement because that will not serve our agenda at this point of time. So when the negotiation point did not reach positively between both India and the other side, India said we won't sign the agreement. So, this also has something to do with the domestic markets which we have in India. So we have complementarity between certain states in what they produce and certain countries within the ASEAN region. So, for instance, just to give you an example, rubber is one of them, or spices are one of them. And these are factors, these are the things which are similar things which are produced in those countries at all. Also, so this in a sense also doesn't help our domestic market as well. So in certain times, being part of global agreements might be very good, but we have to look at our national security interests or our national interests first. And that's the whole objective of foreign policy. It's about how you pursue your national interests abroad. So these are certain aspects which affect all type of businesses, and that's where we do this type of an analysis for businesses on understanding geopolitics, geoeconomics, socio-economics, socio-political. These are the various aspects of some of the aspects of what we term, and how these risks affect businesses in functioning in various geographies can be loosely called as political risk.
Right, right. So that's interesting. So one interesting part you shared about the mitigating energy risk by aligning our relations with Iran, mitigating our, handling our economic risk by not engaging into RCEP. And also, I read about India is one of the 4 countries that did not sign NPT, National Proliferation Treaty,
Okay.
for nuclear
nuclear
weapons,
non-proliferation
right?
treaty. Yes.
Non-proliferation treaty. Yes. So India is one of the 4 countries that did not sign. So that's something in the larger interest of national security as a country. So these are interesting aspects that the whole world is engaging into something under influence of the global powers. However,
Correct.
India refrained from engaging with them. So interestingly, I mean, since independence, Indian roots are, a mix of, we call ourselves socio-capital economy. So it has been very important for India to maintain, good relations with two large superpowers, USA and Russia. So would like to know that how India maintained such delicate balance between these two superpowers, because I mean, for us, we stood good relations with both the countries, right? And for a longer period of time. So your views on how India maintained this balance?
Right after independence, in fact, India adopted basically divided in 2 blocks, which was the capitalist bloc led by the United States and the communist bloc led by the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. And India, interestingly, adopted what we term as non-alignment. So it regarded that it would not align with either of the blocks, but would seek to benefit from both by engaging with both. Now, I, in a sense, would say that non-alignment worked for some time, but over a point of time, non-alignment was actually not a very positive policy. This we could see from 1970s, 71, when India signed a Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation with the Soviet Union. And because of that, it was more or less that we were no more non-aligned, but we were tilting towards the socialist bloc. And then we had, of course, all the changes in our constitution where all the different words were included. So other than just following a mixed pattern of socialist mixed pattern of development, which we generally say, we went on to actually tilting more towards socialism. And our relations also with the United States started dipping because US went much closer to Pakistan, and because of our history with Pakistan and the conflicts, we fell out. And this major reset of foreign policy, which we see with both of them, was only after 1990s, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, and we had probably only so the world moved from what we term as a bipolar system, where we had two powers.
Yes.
We went to a unipolar system, which was dominated by one major power, which is the United States. And obviously, the only probable time when we were able to reset these relations was after India's nuclear tests in 1998, because that gave us a window of opportunity to open dialogue with the United States once again. Because until then, we were sort of still in the mode of our economic restructuring, which we started in 1991 with the whole liberalization of the Indian economy. And we opened up to our immediate neighborhood first. We didn't go directly to the United States, but we were looking for an opportunity, and conducting the nuclear tests opened up that opportunity for India. And from then on, India-US relations have been somewhat mixed, but over the past few, I would say close to a little less than a decade, India's relations have become quite positive towards the US, and that is because the global system is again changing, and we are seeing the rise of a new power, which is China. And
Right.
India again finds itself in sort of a dilemma again. But India's objectives are clear. We're not the same country which we were in 1991. We are a much stronger power, a much economically much more stable country of what we were at that point of time. So right now we have a certain better bargaining power with the United States. So we see the change in relationship which is happening right now. So yeah, I would say that is how it has evolved over a point of time. And this is very interesting because geopolitics again has this is something which happens at a global level, and a country which is
Right.
opportune enough takes the advantage. It takes the advantage. And
Absolutely.
once we have taken the foreign policy advantage, we need to act on it. And still, there are certain signs of us being hesitant towards acting more firmly towards China, but that is slowly diminishing, and which is good when we talk about India as a rising power. You have to
Yeah.
exercise power, and that's how it works in international relations.
Right, right, right. That's interesting. So, Dr. Vignesh, uh, we are experiencing that lots of disturbances on account of current pandemic. So, what do you think that what kind of actions should India take, or what kind of things India should capitalize to succeed in the post-COVID world?
Well, there are two major things that I see. One is actually an internal thing. This whole pandemic has thrown open the door for us to do some self introspection as well, according to me, in terms of looking at how we spend more towards certain social sectors within India, like healthcare, for instance. Because this pandemic has tested the limit, if I would say, to some extent, about how much of our healthcare system can really manage or take an account of, um, uh, about the number of cases and how we are able to manage, how is our efficiency, and this has completely challenged us. So probably that is one area where we as a country need to really invest. And apart from the other areas like education and others which are always there, where we need to invest, always need to invest more, because if we want to reap what we term as our demographic dividend, we need to really increase those areas of focus as well, apart from military spending or others. Because military spending is a given, because we have to do it, because we are surrounded by neighbors which are not very
Absolutely.
friendly to us. That we have to do. And the cost of military and the cost of technology keeps changing. So you will always see that the military spending always rises. It will never decrease over a point of time. But COVID has opened up for us to look at something like healthcare, for instance, and putting more focus on developing those domestic mechanisms so that we can cope with some global pandemic. Because likely this is not the only pandemic which is going to strike us. Something else would come, and we need to be prepared for it. And externally, actually, interestingly, is an opportunity which COVID has brought to us, and that's a geo-economic opportunity which we have. And the geo-economic opportunity is that a lot of countries want to shift their supply chains out of China, and any country which is able to give these industries or these businesses the platform to produce or grow or add to the supply chain will certainly benefit from this. And India really has an opportunity here to get all those businesses which are coming from China into India. But for that, we need a lot of different things to be there in place, like infrastructure or incentives for these type of opportunities do not come always in history, and this type of a thing is something that we need to capitalize on, whether it's global supply chains. When we talk, there has not been a time in history when all the countries have been antagonistic about China to this extent. And
Yes.
At this point of time, everybody is trying to move, and India should take the advantage. But there are a lot of challenges at this point of time. So that would be something that India needs to work on. I guess we have a great advantage there because of our geography, our talented manpower which we have in this country, of people who are really educated and who
Right.
are very talented. And around the world, Indians have done really good everywhere around the world. And why can't they do that in India? Is because if you give them the opportunity, they do that here as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, Dr. Ram, you're also advising corporates on their business
Right.
operations vis-a-vis associated political risk or associated dynamics of geopolitics, right? So, as an organization, you also offer such kind of courses. So, we would love to know that why organizations, I mean, at this point in journey of businesses, what is the importance of having professionals who understand geopolitical risk and paradigm of geopolitics in an organization? What kind of courses you offer, and what are career prospects for such kind of aspirants?
So basically, as global uncertainty is always there, and businesses are always are now at this point of time more connected around the world more than ever, and they need to, and they always have the need to understand this geography or this, their investments, for instance. So you cannot, everyone cannot really know everything right offhand. You may know market conditions, you may know the finance part of it, but you may not know regulatory risk or the politics which comes out of that, which is actually a big problem. And those are the areas where we try to fill in the gap. And basically, political risk or geopolitical risk analysis is to an extent a fairly well established field for some time. But the focus on geopolitics is now more than ever. actually for some point of time, because there is a lot of global uncertainty in how countries behave with each other in the international setting, and that the first casualty of any type of an uncertainty is business. um, People who live in certain countries, for them, it has to seep down, and that takes a long time. But once there's a trade embargo, the direct casualty is a business. The business loses its profitability, it loses its ability to function in a certain place. um, Wars or conflicts can erupt any point of time, and the triggers could be socio-economic issues. The Arab Spring, for instance, nobody would have predicted that it would completely change the whole situation of the region as a whole. And that was the that type of things are some, and that started in Tunisia when there were protests over the rising costs of food or vegetables, and a person lit set himself on fire, and that fire just spread throughout the whole of the Middle East, or West Asia as we term it. And these socio-economic factors could trigger it. It could come from anywhere, and these are the things which businesses do definitely require, apart from individual investors. For instance, you can't really think of investing billions of dollars and not wanting to know what the risk might be for your billions of dollars to return your investment, right? So that is where we look at, and we focus in our organization on geopolitics, geoeconomics, socio-economic, and socio-political risk issues. And I wouldn't say we are a very old organization, but I would say what we are doing is pretty different in terms of the methodology and the work which we do. And that sort of changes the existing things. You will get, definitely we do get resistance from very established brands or established names, because whenever you're trying to change, or whenever you're trying to disrupt an existing system to your advantage, that always happens. And that's not my concern, actually, to be very honest. But my concern is to actually to put across something which helps businesses. And one of the focus areas is also to look at the MSMEs, and how do you really help MSMEs to become export competent in this globalized world. And that is something very close to me as well personally, because I see a great potential in India's medium and small industries as well, apart from the large corporates and how they function. So that is the thing. And we, like you rightly said, we have 2 professional programs which we have put out right now, and our programs start in November. So where we'll be focusing on providing the analytical skills which are required for industries, or even future leaders who are interested in becoming, joining these positions, to develop these type of analytical skills, which will be very much required for businesses. So one course is on political risk, and the other is on understanding the phenomenon of terrorism, because that is one major security issue the world has been grappling with for a very long time. So these are the 2 focus areas. And for students or for others who are thinking of whether this is a feasible thing to study or not, will I get a job? I would say that if you're creative and you're 100% dedicated to it, you would get a job in any field. And this type of a field is very specialized, and the demand for it is consistently increasing. So definitely there is a good scope for pursuing this as a career option.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Vignesh Ram, for sharing this insightful thoughts on geopolitics and geopolitical risk. Thank you everyone for joining us on this amazing conversations. We conclude this brief conversation.
Thank you. Before I go, actually, I wanted to say that the idea of peer spot is actually quite very, very interesting. And like we've had discussions before, I found it to be a very interesting, it actually does it actually comes straight to the point of what people want. They want to exchange ideas, and facilitating it using this is an amazing idea. And I'm amazed by the diversity of people who are there in PeerSpot, and I think that's a great idea, I must say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vignesh. I mean, that's really valuable thought you shared. Thank you so much. Friends, if you like these conversations, please follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Subscribe our YouTube channel. You can imagine if this brief conversation has been so engrossing. I assure you that having personalized conversation with Dr. Vignesh can be a more experience building in multiple ways. So please feel free to explore the platform of PeerSpot. We will continue this saga of insightful conversations. We'll soon announce our next guest. We started in March 2018, and since then we are glad to host professionals and creators from different walks of life. Like as Dr. Vignesh rightly shared, we host people from neuroscience, healthcare, hydroponics, armed forces, economics, political theory, santoor player, sitar player, Kathak and Bharatnatyam dancers, Mohiniyattam dancer. So people from different walks of life are willing to meet and share their experiences. Please feel free to sign up on PeerSpot, explore this world of beautiful professionals who are willing to meet and share their experiences. Thank you so much for joining us on these conversations. Once again, thank you, Dr. Vignesh, for joining us and sharing your valuable. So stay tuned on PeerSpot. We'll soon announce our subsequent sessions. Please feel free to sign up on PeerSpot and explore it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh. See you.